dawn of time, the realm of Earth has been sought by forces of evil. Now,
Mortal Kombat begins again.
Mortal Kombat.
We're under attack. Let's do it!
Combat time!
All new, all USA.
Mortal Kombat continues.
Mortal Kombat, Defenders of the Realm. Saturdays only on USA Network.
That was the nostalgic sneak peek I had seen in both the Obsolete Preview channel and USA itself. I was 9 years old when it first came out, and it was at the very start of 4th grade. I was always anxious to see this epic animated series every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. sharp, and ever since its sudden cancellation later that same year, I always found Defenders of the Realm to be the underdog of the entire juggernaut, even to this day. With an unlucky streak of 13 episodes and not many reruns, not to mention it's 10 times better than Zelda's 13, I am the Ekron writer, and I'm here to list and highlight every session the miniseries offers, and I hope it give it a brighter future. Let's get fighting! Starting off the list is one of my least favorite episodes of the Mortal Kombat miniseries, Fall from Grace. I wasn't too fond of this session, and it really did make Stryker and Sonya look like complete, utter, and incompetent characters, especially to each other. During the usual cyber invasion after chasing a portal, Sonya just got too headstrong, and wanted to go above and beyond her orders and battle strategy. Unfortunately, her foolishness just cost her and Stryker's lives, even suspending her from her rank. First off, it doesn't make sense, since she belongs to the Special Forces and she doesn't necessarily have a rank in this small non-profit team. Second, since when is Stryker Sonya's CEO despite being a riot police officer? Does it really matter what type of position you're in, aside from Raiden being the leader in this ragtag group? God, does it always bother me. And Stryker was never a favorite of mine neither. I know he's usually the tactician and Johnny's inferior replacement, but this episode just ripped out the rug from under me. I don't hate Sonya's persona like so many, but Stryker was just the oil and vinegar here. So, since they've been injured, Stryker and Sonya had no choice but to bond while the rest of the heroes were out chasing another portal. It was almost like cabin fever here. But as the base got invaded by Tarkatans and a few Shokan, they needed to work together to defend it. Seeing the cave expand was interesting, and maybe Tadmog was right on the Special Forces designing the place and the Dragon Jets, on account of the supplies and ammo. Maybe he can cover that topic eventually. I actually thought they'd be on their last legs with the ruler making them surrender till they had their ducks in a row. And have Kiba warm up to Stryker. I don't blame him for hating him. And Sonya was no longer suspended, as if it really matters. What was Stryker gonna do? Kick her out of the team and make her rejoin her regular squad? I would. Yeah, that episode was certainly uncomfortable for me. The plot and the two officers were abysmal. Having the cocky cop demeanor was just so damned aggravating. The B-plot was just there. And would it actually matter if it was taken out? Probably not. Originally, this was gonna be the bottom of the barrel, but from the previous entry, it was just the second worst. Just like Fall from Grace, this was unnecessary and uninspiring. Katana recalled failing to protect her mentor Ramoth, one of the one-shot characters introduced only in this show and never brought up again. He gave Katana a lesson on learning to trust her instincts as well as others, after he was fatally wounded while hiding away the two magical swords, known as the Swords of Ilkhan, from their arch-nemesis Zara. She was banished to a desolate realm and vowed for revenge on the princess ever since. This was just another episode where the A and B plots didn't match very well. The team, minus Nightwolf, which is a common annoying plot element, chase a portal to a bitter cold cavern. It burst open and a group abducted Jax, Sonya, and Katana, while the rest of the group don't seem to enter through the portal, as if it's an illusion, a projector against a caved wall, and have everyone attack with no result and denied access. I don't get it. Anyway, the main trio's captured by Amazons led by Katana's past enemy. She possessed one of the sacred blades imprisoning Jax, and in order to prevent his demise, she demands for Katana to find the other sword she hid in Ilkhan. So she and Sonya go deal with some traps, including some Dunblanca look-alike. He was quite a scary sight. It was absurd that the only way to make progress was use the hidden blade. What, were these obstacles made from the same blade that was stashed away from intruders? Either way, they prevail, return to face Zara. Jax was on his last legs, and since they'd be in a standoff, Katana bested the useless witch mano a mano, while the rest of the cowards flee away. They always go by that never say die rule. It's so annoying. Katana throws both swords into a rip to the Elder Gods nowhere, save Jax and return to the team. And the Ilkhan realm nor the one-shot characters weren't brought up again, probably because of the session's boring plot. Aside from Fall of Grace being worse, it did actually highlight the interesting dynamic between Sonya and Katana, the only women present in the team. And as a kid, I never understood why having just a girl around was less irritating. I'm not a girly girl, so I'm not into the usual normalcy, but I slowly realized having the same type and a more soothing and understanding presence makes it all the worthwhile. I kind of wish Katana and Sonya's budding partnership would happen more often, within the Juggernaut itself, instead of rejecting the latter and making them as situational tools with minimal development. Be damned, MK1! Skin Deep was also mediocre. This was the episode in which tension was flaring as it was created an inconvenient wedge between Utana by a certain backstabber, typical to those I really hate. After Lu's flashback scene on decimating Shang Tsung and avenging his brother Chan,
they cut all the good parts!
I've lost everything I loved. You gotta remember, this was made for younger audiences, but I wish that Threshold didn't always play it safe. If only they would have utilized the gory discretion shot like those action Hanna-Barbera shows, they would have gotten far. And at first I never picked it up, but while the heroes were doing their usual work, Lu brought up his concerns on being champion.
Is there something on your mind, Liu Kang?
It's kind of strange, but I've been thinking a lot lately about never growing older because of the Mortal Kombat tournament.
The Elder Gods decreed that the victor would not age until the next tournament, so the champion may return to compete generation after generation.
Right, but since the Outworlders violated the rules, there may never be another tournament. which means I may never age.
And you fear what it will be like outliving all your friends and loved ones?
That's part of it. But the idea of spending eternity in constant battle, I just don't know if I can handle it.
I understand. Remember, I myself have lived 10,000 years.
You don't look a day over 500.
Thank you. But you must not confuse agelessness with immortality. You're both vulnerable, like any humans.
Well then, I guess that makes us the perfect match.
Can you blame this guy? Especially when this happens. That's right, it's freaking Rain. And this was my first impression on the treacherous Edenian prince. I never knew Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 existed, nor did Trilogy catch my eye. So, it wasn't until that, along with Annihilation, that introduced me to the holier-than-thou Hydrokinetic. And ever since these two incidences, I despised him, and it only got worse with Armageddon and MK1. This began my first bad impression, and it all started when Kitana turned on Lu's back summarizing her ex, who was rumored to be dead. I'm glad his friend still got his back. In the end, Kitana gets captured since she was too weak to realize Rain working for Khan like he always does. And there's this interesting moment about Striker too.
There was a girl. She used to look at me the way Kitana looks at you. But I was a riot cop. My career always came first. So I guess I was never around when she needed me. She finally walked out on me. For another guy. You ever tell anyone and I'll use this baton on your head. That's a promise.
Striker and Lu weren't that bad working together. And it was nice seeing the Centaurs the first time out. You won't see Motaro till later. And seeing Lu's epicness plowing through the temple's tracks, it was really cool. Ryan's the most underrated Liu Kang ever. So he catches up to Kitana and she actually wanted to challenge Rain herself. Where's the chivalry? Well, it don't matter considering he escapes into a watery portal and never seen again. Till Annihilation, anyway. It wasn't one of my favorites since I was young, but Lu's support team, seeing the Centaurs, and even Rain's jokes makes it all worthwhile. And if there's any Edenian relationship that can work, I'd rather stick with Jade hooking up with Taven. Perhaps Rain would be better off with Tanya since they're always both blackguards. While most of the episodes were just bland and subpar, this was just flat out despicable. Abandoned was just trash of an episode, and I wish that plot point itself was just a throwaway gag. During a monsoon, Jax all of a sudden decides to leave the team, and the thought on losing his grandfather seems to cloud his mind. Liu Kang sympathized as he too lost some family members of his, including his parents and his brother Chan. Good thing Threshold was the only one that referred to that, and no one else. Anyway, the team, especially Sonya and Raiden, were disheartened in Jax's decision, though he had a point on the constant fighting that what's the use if your heart is no longer in the just cause. It soon convinced the protective god otherwise as he visits his elder's cabin and gave up his relationship with Sonya. I mean, yeah, it should have been Johnny, or perhaps Liu Kang, but it wouldn't matter since he's gone. So Jax meets up with a mysterious, seductive stranger, Ruby, who had orchestrated an ambush led by Ermac as they're a couple of Khan's top soldiers. Jax is then abducted to his keep in Outworld, and Nightwolf, being the slick genius, tracked the weak and badass before his permanent exit. Jax was tortured and never gave the location of the mountain base, and as the heroes were cornered, Ruby decided to have a change of heart and assist them on their escape. The farewell between her and Jax wasn't actually so heartwarming. Good riddance to that treacherous false defender of her own realm. The peaceful ending with the horses and Jax's realization was a nice touch, but it still left me scarred. For the longest time, I always thought that Ruby was connected with Scarlet. They're both red female ninjas who work for evil. They're mysterious and deadly, and I believe that after the episode, it's possible that Khan used Ruby and transformed her to the Blood Mage, like reformed and reanimated into thinking she was born from his seed. Also, the animators had messed up here. At first, Ruby was shrouded as black like Jax, but it was soon whitened later on. Much like this episode, especially since it's the second to last, what's the point of this? First Jade, now Ruby? It's like if anyone's associated with the gem turns traitor. If I were Jax or anyone else meeting another gem character, I would run! Just like the one before it, Familiar Red also angered me so much. Never liked any of the scenarios here whatsoever. And again, I feel it's just another ugly, meaningless duckling. Kano just built a portal spider, a gizmo that is lively and creates rips throughout the world, and lead the heroes in a wild goose chase. How he knew about the combatants performing these stunts we'll never know. Perhaps he was a spy. But whenever it bursts open a portal, Nightwolf's main computer sets off an alarm signaling the heroes to skedaddle and seal it. Just like with Dagon abusing Cairo, enemies do this to send out armies and invade the world indirectly, while also making it vulnerable, weakening its natural dimensional fabric to prevent such calamities. Kind of like decimating the ozone layer with more pollutants. In order for the heroes to split up and also give Nightwolf barrages of disdain and resentment, Kano emits temporary rips to do just that. Time and time again, they grow more argumentative over the wild goose chases. That is until Raiden arrives and gives him one of the best lectures ever.
Do you think I'm losing it too?
I have no idea, but I do think maybe you've fallen into a trap. One that's captured many a mortal.
What do you mean?
Relying too much on machinery and not enough on gut instincts. You're a shaman. You've got great inner tools. Why don't you forget about that and try this?
This all started in Egypt. Maybe it's time I check it out for myself.
I'll be happy to mind the shop while you're away.
So Nightwolf and Kiba traced back to where these false alarms started and found a relic with a black dragon symbol. I don't know how they can sense evil, nor know what it feels or smells like, but whatevs. And this seems to open up old wounds within Sonya as Jax recaps the loss of her partner Lexer. I liked how it was more in depth on her vengeance. The Great Pyramid was of course rigged, and it was awesome for Nightwolf to plow through them with his shamanistic skills. It was also rewarding how Sonya finally got her way over Kano again, but due to that stupid rule that forbids death, it was underwhelming. I really didn't like that episode, having the team break up due to falsity, having Nightwolf receive the constant backlashes even though it wasn't his screw-ups, relying too much on technology and not gut instinct, which most of us tend to do. and an anticlimactic end was always as bitter as wormwood. And since it's mostly insignificant, I won't recommend it. Alright, we should be approaching the gray area now. Acid Tongue was a so-so episode. We're finally being introduced to the Saurian race, although they're still as malicious as Reptile. And since Defenders of the Realm takes place after the first film, Reptile had already been killed. So they needed to come up with a clone of his. Enter Commodai. Even though he's a rough copy, he was a decent henchman, and a formidable fighter too. He's slick and quite the strategist, especially when he's proven to be a threat, when he disables Jax's bionic arms with his acid and abducts Sonya, like Deja Vu to MK2. But without his vital microchips functioning, it made Jax lose it. I mean, come on! In MK2, he was excellent without him. And I very much prefer the malfunctioning of his arms rather than, you know. So while the heroes chase another portal and Nightwolf takes watch, Jax is the only one to save Sonya. Wouldn't it be better if he had a backup partner? Anyway, Jax still loses his self-confidence without his reliable arms. You know, this seems like a common theme in the Threshold installments, to always believe in yourself.
Stop beating yourself up. You want to find your G? Start believing in yourself.
Katana's like, nah, player, just believe. Believe!
Believe that everybody I know is a goner!
Well, they'll definitely be goners in like 9 more years. Ugh. Anyway, Jax managed and gets knocked off the precipice. Yet, he miraculously still winds up at the top and uses his brains rather than brawn. Kind of reminds me of that awesome Toonami speech. With a change of strategy in mind, he uses the lethal poison to release Sonya from her shackles. Then they gang up on the bastard, till he once again retreats like many other enemies. Still, it has proven Jax he can still be of good use without his arm enhancements. And Commodai and this episode inspired me to make my first major battle between him and Kung Lao, and finish off the Saurian stragglers in Shaolin Monks Part 2. Brains and brawn must both be used, and plot holes are potholes to a story. Remember that. So I pinpointed this episode at the epicenter of the list, since it's kind of like yin and yang. The things are, this was the episode that kicked off the series, and was featured the most in the aforementioned trailer. This gives us the scoop on what's been going on between the second tournament and Khan's invasion. Our heroes always chase after portals and mostly battle hordes of the Emperor's cybers. That wasn't until an unexpected stranger comes along. By the Elder Gods, it's Sub-Zero! I was indeed thrilled to see him again after MK3, contrary to the stubborn Sonya. I can kinda see her predicament as no one knew the cold-hearted assassin had a brother, and figured he survived his demise by Liu Kang. And you know, through his flashback and soon their acceptance, I always labeled these two together as the odd couple, by warriors with opposing elements. They were reluctant on having him join their team and bring him to their secretive base. And that's when we're introduced to the underappreciated Dragon Jets, even Nightwolf's companion Kiba. I love them both, no matter how much controversy they receive. The place soon gets ransacked, and Sonya believed that Kwai led their enemies to it, until he has proven his worth and assisted by Nightwolf, merging with Kiba. Hey, I really loved that move. And it wasn't long before his old rival Scorpion makes his move. And as declared by Raiden, Mortal Kombat continues. This was just a nice start for the series, but other than seeing everything for the first time and having Kwai join their ranks, it isn't as special. The second episode is actually a step up, and that was when the series began to raise the bar. This leaves off from the first episode as Scorpion invades Earth via Rip and begins to rise his colossal undead army from across all of the realms. Nightwolf detecting the unnatural activity caused the heroes to make haste, and the signature makes them return to Outworld, the same foreboding frontier since the previous tournament. Considering it's a kid-friendly series, they didn't do too bad with the skeletal lesions. And I just love Jax's, or rather Dorian's, line.
Rest in peace. Or should I say, pieces.
Nice! Seriously, this show is so undervalued. As they arrive at Shank's tomb, Scorpion plans on resurrecting the sorcerer himself, and consumed by rage, Kwai pays disregard to lose more calmer advice. It was nice to know how Subby gave us a little intel on how Scorpion was a serious threat to the Lin Kuei. Unfortunately, without a sound mind, he lost to him easily. He also referred to lose battle with his brother, and shown gratitude than vengeance. He was also confident that as the victor, he's more than capable on stopping him. This could have been a draw between two pyrokinetics and... Wait a minute! Did I just hear Shank's song in the background?
It has begun!
No freaking way! I was ecstatic when I first heard this, and the track from Psycho Sonic became an instant favorite in the film's album. It was made by Threshold after all. God, I miss it so much. I wish it still existed. Before I get emotional, might as well finish with Liu Kang winning over Scorpion, and Raiden resealing the dead. But the victory was unsatisfying since Kwai held back a potential finishing move. Damn you, never say die rule! You cowards could have used this gory discretion shot! Needless to say, there's always gonna be some rip activity to follow. A little repetitive, I know. It was better than the first, that's for sure. Especially with that surprising Easter egg. Kudos, Threshold. This is when the series began to be really good. So deep upon the insane lore the Mortal Kombat juggernaut is known for. No pointless gimmicks nor asinine character development is found here in Cabal's tragic debut. Sonya and Sub-Zero found themselves in an underground abandoned amphitheater, and all of a sudden they were firebombed by the elusive Kano and his Black Dragon clan. Sonya gets injured during the gunfight until she was saved by a very fast and masked figure. Apparently the heroes were chasing after a portal, or rather a portal generator which is highly explosive, and gathers massive volts of electricity from the subterranean subway tunnels. This might be a callback to MK3's first arena, but I'm not certain. After Sonya recovered from her wounds, she met the defective Cabal, an escape aid from the Black Dragons after they decided to work with Shao Kahn. Cabal, thinking they'd be so consumed with power, making all those weapon deals and destroying the world in a combined effort, decided to have a change of heart, resulting him being in a respirator in order to survive, and also hide himself from the common folk who would be frightened by his appearance. He wasn't necessarily too scary, but I guess they toned it down too much for the kids. I wish it was darker like Johnny Quest in Reboot. Cabal decides to help the heroes, and he seems to know their every trick, from identifying their footsteps to knowing each member, including the deadly assassin Hideyoshi. As warned by Sub-Zero, he's Shao Kahn's most severe brawler, even enough to incapacitate most of the squad, excepting, you guessed it, Cabal. I guess all of Striker's ninja training didn't pay off. They eventually followed the destructive generator, and Cabal bashed through the front lines, which sadly destroyed his own hideout. I really felt sorry in that reprieve, when Sonya described her friend Maggie as people condescending her beyond her paraplegia. Quite a shame, and a valid point, since society always tends to make neurodivergence and physical diversions inferior, even though the normal ones are frankly the weaker ones themselves. Nevertheless, it's an absolute downer and injustice that Cabal never got another shot, and never having the chance to assist and join the team. Why not? Is it too much for the animators? What wasted potential, especially when Cabal was redeemed in the reboot.
Reboot!
Only to have him and Striker fall from grace. I really like the episode, Cabal's haunting theme, and the role he played here. If only he'd be considered as an anti-hero, rather than a turncoat working as an arms and drug dealer. The main developers never considered, just like main society doesn't to the lesser fortunate. This was a very tough choice and position to pinpoint on the list. Overthrown, aka the last episode of Defenders of the Realm, was an absolute heartbreaker. The unlucky final session made the series end 11 days before Christmas of '96, and I usually blame the Nintendo 64 on that regard. This wasn't just during mid-December, but also revolves around the 5,000th anniversary of the noble king of Edenia, Gerard's death. This was also the first time I ever saw Denia, a majestic realm based on the biblical Garden of Eden, and how it was invaded by Shao Kahn after losing 10 consecutive Mortal Kombat tournaments. The Day of Shao Kahn, much like the Day of Sigma from Mega Man, was creepy. It was also the time I encountered the most underrated character in the series, the esteemed Hawk Knight Asgarth. Being that Katana mentioned her dad several times, I thought that bird was such, ironically. Also, the graphics were rendered better than the other episodes, and I felt very anxious on which side the scary Shao Kahn Shiva would be on, and whether or not it'd be the end of Lutana's relationship. Maybe even make a relationship with Shang Tsung. Even when Nightwolf was staying behind once again as the warriors marched into battle, including Raiden, who's powerless in enemy territory. I was feeling merely the same as the heroes themselves, especially since Kitana's plan backfired as Khan ambushed the team, and when Shiva sided with the demon sorcerer Shang, as well as his ambition to rule Outworld by taking the throne only for himself. Fortunately, the Shogun's worst enemy, Motaro, and the Centaurs caught wind of Raiden's negotiation, which caused a fatal slaughter. Whoever survived would be the new brutal ruler of the realm, and Khan escaped with the Shadow Priests. And I always thought he was in a weakened state from his revival after the second tournament, and built his strength by ruining Earth's dimensional fabric. Unfortunately...
Alright, next tape! Hey, wait a minute, what happened? What happens next? Come on, let's see the next episode!
That's it?
What?
The show was cancelled after that.
Defenders of the Realm got yanked. It was like I went through a tragedy, much like the sudden death of VR troopers earlier that year. It didn't matter to me on their slight victories because all was for naught. This was a severe blow to my psyche, and I still feel pangs from it now. This is what started Aiko's future, as your younger self was pulled away, then saw her friends as the undead. And that was when my chronology began. Through all these intense circumstances, this was a very meaningful episode, and I hope that in Asgard shall never be left in the shadows again after 27 years.
I'm sorry that it didn't work out for you, Kitana, but I'm relieved I won't be losing you.
You will never lose me.
Here's a shocking factor, but old friends never die isn't number one.
What the heck? What the heck? This can't be happening! What?
What's going on?
Do a barrel roll!
But seriously, this was always a very crucial episode. As any fan of Mortal Kombat can tell you, it is indeed the best. Why? Let me explain. This was mostly the episode that's heavily based on the series' lore, as it dove deep into Kwai and Smoke's friendship to the point on being brothers, the Lin Kuei using lobotomy, and how Sub-Zero became a fugitive while his closest friend turned rogue. I also thought Oniro as the clan's sinister Grandmaster was the best way to go. I wish he would have been another canon immigrant for the main series, let alone the ideal evil leader of the Lin Kuei. It was one of the most dramatic episodes I had ever seen before. Kwai escaping from the watchful eye of a diabolical corporation, having him lose his best and only friend to the mercy on churning into a mindless machine, even the nail-biting fights involving him against the might of the advanced cyber assassins, Cyrax and Sector, and being powerless against Oniro. And he wanted to deal with it all alone? What was he thinking? I was enamored and anxious in this milestone, even when this new enemy. Oniro has everything necessary to be a main combatant, from using the sacred dragon medallion to enhance his animalistic skills, to utilizing his traits as a hawk, panther, and chimera? And why in the hell did he have to steal Shang Tsung's catchphrase?
Your soul is mine!
God damn it! Someone needs to save him! Oh, it's Smoke. But unfortunately, while he instantly changed his functioning after processing the situation, Oniro still got away and lived for another day. Worse still is that his valiance was for nothing as he decided to forfeit his lifelong relationship with Kwai. Despite never fighting him, injuring him emotionally and not physically. Scumbag! This was definitely Luke Perry's finest hour. I never cared and was too young to get into 90210. So this was the icing on the cake. It made me become a Kwai fan to this day, and how he was the best Sub-Zero. It's lower as it had a lack of closure, and it just was a foreshadowing of Smoke's more tragic and irritable fates later on. And Striker's training on becoming a ninja was never brought up again. I highly recommend the 3-part fanfic, The Ghost in the Machine. That and this session are and should be relevant and impactful elements to the series and to my chronology as well. I know, it's insane since I despise Quan Chi even to this very day. Yet still, this particular episode always made a positive and a negative impact on me. The secret of Quan Chi was just the series' critical point, for myself included. This was indeed the Oni's true debut in the series, unlike many who believe it's pathologies. And it was proven as another canon immigrant. The omnipresent sorcerer uses the onesie, the Pool of Destiny, along with his Copperhead sidekick to hatch a plan on crippling Earthrealm's defenses. He discovers the lost Sateran artifact, which was a crystallized heart of its most Falsaurian ruler, and facades himself as a kid and outworld refugee to infect our heroes, all excepting Nightwolf and Raiden. This was when the dark stuff really hits the fan. The longer the effect, the darker their souls. It was more so enough to wipe out an entire army as they kill each other from within. Katana and Raiden were the only ones seen enough to identify the culprit, and once believed the Gem of Tetsuri was a myth. Personally, the episode should have been named as such. Of course, Quan springs his dark magic and traps onto the heroes, so Kiba was able to track this immense evil. Wonder what it can smell and feel like. Quan then challenges them to fight each other in order to reach the heart, even abuses poor Kiba, in which he had no time to merge with his owner. I really thought Nightwolf would be at his mercy until he surprisingly used his telepathy.
The darkness! Fight the darkness!
The tension would just make anyone explode! And through his clear head and being the worthy defender, Nightwolf had become an instant favorite to this very day. While Quan still retreats due to the lousy never say die rule, it was quite the damn roller coaster. Despite the stressors, elements from that episode alone was inspirational. From Quan's roles, to the intense battles, to the sinister gem. As a kid, I wanted to make the Koopalings and other crossover characters important. I mentioned that incident numerous times in my chronology. And aside from pussy believers who think Heart's a pointless ability, and the episode itself, they inspired me to make my OC Igo Crackle, and use her crystal kinesis and cardiokinesis to make her own heart gems with the opposite positive effects. Side note, I once had a Snake sticker book which helped me identify the companion as a Copperhead.
Oh, shut up, Jax. All you ever do is bellyache.
Hey, you got a problem with that, Lulu?
It's not funny. Yes, it is.
It made me aware of Jax's early trauma, which can motivate him to be the strongest badass ever. And this episode proves that the heart isn't something to be reckoned with, as it can either be a tool for good, or it can be warped with evil. Even from beyond the grave. With all the pros and cons this episode had to offer, it was one of the most crucial moments in both my chronology and the whole juggernaut. This episode should never be ignored, especially since it introduces my all-time hated character. So that leaves us only one more episode to cover. You know what it is already, so let's delve into it. This last episode was one of the hardest to rank, but this one in particular hardly has any setbacks nor personal issues. I wouldn't say it's a flawless victory, but through process of elimination, this was just the golden standard. The best episode in Defenders of the Realm happens to be Resurrection. This episode centers around the rebirth of our famous arch-nemesis Shang Tsung, and it does take place soon after his demise in the first tournament. Two shadow priests find his skeletal remains from his tomb and stand before Khan. They perform their successful ritual and Khan greets his promising messenger with a backhand.
You'll bring me back for this.
You failed me. Your defeat in Mortal Kombat cost me the Earthrealm.
Unlike before, he was banned to the Netherrealm, the tortured Inferno, instead of the Cobalt Mines. But Khan has reconsidered to give him another chance of redemption by gifting him the powerful elemental orb that's capable of manipulating the elements, including Raiden's own abilities. With Earthrealm constantly being bombarded, there was no better time. And after a threat if he fails, Shang shows his true colors on becoming his own ruler by winning over Khan as shown before. The after effects began to sap Raiden's strength, and Nightwolf analyzed the threat Shang had pulled. Everyone, including the shaman, went to the source of the rift, while Jax stayed with the weakened Thunder God. Much like Sonya and Kitana, I really like Jax's and Raiden's private chats. But after reaching the Tropical Isle, Shang unleashes his Cyber Squad and then his Fury. Now keep in mind, this was after Twister came out earlier in '96. So I was kind of pessimistic due to his unpredictable, unchallenged skills. That fatal orb made Shang an absolute powerhouse before he became a Titan. He trapped the heroes in a heated ravine, which actually began to give Sub-Zero dehydration. Great idea, and relatable. One of the best moments was the talk between Jax and Raiden, who rode shotgun in a dragon jet for once. Raiden chose Earthrealm, which poses great power, fragileness, and many pure souls that possess the driving human spirit. And he's been a sucker for the underdog. While Jax vowed to keep fighting to protect it, and they've noticed they can work well even with mortals. For once, Raiden shows worry over the orb. They were shut down by it, and I felt awful on Raiden being weakened by the orb. Good thing Jax managed to stay, otherwise the heroes would perish. Especially since Shang conjured a quake to close the fissure. I was anxious for the guys to be saved, though thankfully Raiden made Shang drop the orb and deactivate it just in the nick of time. He got his powers back, and had an epic short fight before kicking to Khan.
Better idea. I'm going to let the Emperor deal with you.
Fun wasn't sent into space, and I always wondered who that shadowy enemy was. It wasn't until later, thanks to the MK Wiki, that he sent it to the universe of Street Fighter, with then Bison having the relic. It was actually intended to be a crossover product. I think this is my favorite episode after all. There doesn't seem to be any shenanigans, and the ending's not piss poor. And that's all 13 episodes of Defenders of the Realm. While some episodes were lackluster, hit or miss, or quite an improvement, overall I think Defenders of the Realm is a small nostalgic series. Ever since I first saw it on an ad on the preview channel, I always was head over heels for it. It made Nightwolf, Kwai, Lutana, Raiden, and others more epic and memorable. But tragedy struck once it got yanked 11 days before Christmas. I always wish that future companies would pick up where the show left off, and maybe give Asgarth and other canon immigrants a second chance. I even recalled finding it in a TV guide airing at 5 a.m. each Sunday a year later, and I ditched the action block once it dropped the show. This 13-episode run means a lot to me, so much so that I even began my MK Chronology series soon after, which actually occurred after Shaolin Monks and before the fanfic series began. I'm the Ekron writer, and I still love Defenders of the Realm to this very day, despite all its flaws, and while it's been toned down, and it hasn't necessarily featured other combatants like Kung Lao, Johnny Cage, Melina, and others, I'd still give Threshold the benefit of the doubt for representing the Juggernaut to younger audiences. It's a decent starting point, and I hope consumers would appreciate it in the future. Farewell, fellow combatants.